All right, so thank you to our videographer. We're doing the slump mold demo today. What a slump mold is it's literally slumping clay into a mold. Most of these are made out of plaster, but you can also make them out of wood or other materials. Plaster is the best because plaster absorbs moisture. And we have many of these, which I'll show you after, but I just want to show you how to make one really quick. Basically, what the mold looks like is the bottom of your piece that you're going to sink the clay into. Okay, so you're going to start with a slab. Remember that after you roll out the slab, you always want to compress it on both sides with the rubber rib. You don't want to have that canvas texture, and you also want to compress the clay so that it is nice and free of cracks and air bubbles. And then, as always, if you have air bubbles, you can poke them and go over them again with the rubber rib. Okay. So now, obviously, I don't need this entire piece, and so typically what some people will do is they'll turn the mold over, and then they'll just kind of cut loosely around it so that you don't have to drop an entire huge piece of clay on it. You just have a piece that's more specific to the size. Most of the time, rolling them through just the regular black slab roller will give you a 1/4 inch thickness, and that's usually thick enough for most of the molds. But I'll show you at the end too that there are some molds that are a little deeper, and so sometimes people like to roll thicker slabs, and for that we'll use the blue slab roller, and I can show you guys how to do that too. Okay, so there's really nothing fancy. You want your slab to be nice and wet. If it's too hard, sometimes it's hard to get it to press into the mold, but it is compressed on both sides, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it up, and then I'm just going to do this. Okay, and don't do it too hard because you don't want to break the mold. Sometimes people like to actually drop the clay into the mold too, but I find just giving it a little love tap is nice. You can actually see it starting to sink in already to the mold. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you don't want to push it, you want to hit it and give it pressure. So by hitting it, you're stretching the clay a little bit better, and if you start pushing, sometimes you'll rip the clay. And so you just want to give it a love tap, and you can hold it if you want to too. And you want to try your best to push the clay into the mold as tight as possible so that you don't have any gaps. Because if you have like an air gap on the bottom, then your mold won't be, the perfect shape that you're looking for. Okay, and so obviously you can see my finger marks, and I don't like that. So this is where you can start to take, and once it's compressed into the mold, then you can start taking your finger and you can kind of compress and smooth that clay. And this is the time where you want to try to spend a lot of time, and I won't do it for the sake of the time of your demo. I'm not going to go in here and like smooth it out perfectly, but this is basically the process that you would use. You don't want any of your fingerprints to be in there either. You can also take a damp sponge, but be cautious because what the sponge does is it'll wipe away the clay and it'll leave all the grog behind, and it'll make it sandy. So if you do use the sponge, I encourage you to go over it with your finger again just to kind of push that grog down. But sometimes the sponge does help. Okay. All right, and then once you've got it into the mold, what I like to do is trim the top off. And so obviously I would have more smoothing to do on this if I were going to keep it, but just because it's a demo, I'm going to take the fettling knife, and what you can do is you can put the fettling knife in straight like this, and you can run it all the way around the mold, and so you can trim off the excess or the top of your mold. And obviously I wouldn't hold this in the air. I'm doing it just for the demo. But you can go around and just try to cut it as precisely as you can. And again, this is cutting off all the excess. Okay, so let's see how that looks. Sometimes you have to do this more than once too. You can see, and actually I lost some of the corners. So just note that like this may take you a couple tries. So like I cut it a little bit too close and I lost some of the clay in the corners. So you can kind of trial and error too. Like you might have to make a couple before you get one that you like, and that's fine. So pop it out of the mold. This is where you blow dry it. And so you can use a blow dryer. You just start blow drying it. And what you'll notice is as you blow dry it, you'll see a little gap appear around the outside. And then once that gap appears all the way around, you'll be able to pop it out. And this mold is pretty dry, so it'll probably, yeah. So this mold was super dry, and you can actually see it's wet now because it absorbed that moisture, and the mold pops out. Ideally, though, you'd probably want to dry it a little bit more because you can see it's kind of flimsy. So you don't want it to be super flimsy when it comes out because then you'll warp the shape. The best thing about slump molds is you can make stackable items because they're all the same size. And so as long as you let them dry enough before you pull them out, you can have like a series of plates or something that would all stack. So this is a really good way to make like dinnerware or sets of things that you can actually use at your house. Okay. And so that's basically how the slump mold works. And then from there, you would treat it like a regular piece of pottery. You would go in and clean up the edges or do any type of design work that you'd want to do. Cool. All right, so going over to the slump mold cabinets. I've made these in the past. So like I have somebody in 6th period that made their own slump mold too. But these do take a lot of time to dry. We don't really have a lot of time to make them this year. Like they take a whole week for them to dry if you wanted to make your own. But this is how, there's a lot of different shapes and sizes. And then like I made this one in college and it's beefy. So you can either do like a thick slab in here, or what some people will do is they'll do 2 slabs and they'll slip and score them in the middle, which is a little trickier, but these make like really nice chili bowls. But yeah, we have lots of different types up here. Like somebody last semester made a star. It's kind of cool. And then she had to roll the thick slab because you're pushing the clay in really deep. But yeah, these are all the different slump molds that you can use. And so what I'm asking you guys to do for this week is to just try out a slump mold. And like basically the requirements for this project are really low now because we made stuff for the field trip. But you guys can try them out. I just want you guys to get the experience of working with the slump molds. Cool. So you can try one, you can make a couple, as long as you produce something with the slump molds. That's what I'm looking for. And then obviously the field trip stuff is the first priority. Get that done in time. But cool beans. Questions?